The text from my mother arrived at 11:42 a.m. We can't help with the surgery, Lauren, we're destitute. I stared at the screen, my left hand throbbing in its bandages, the nerve pain singing a high white-hot note. $4,500. That was the price to save my career. They didn't have it, or so they said. 30 seconds later, a notification slid down from the top of the screen. Instagram, my brother Logan, keys to the new Loft. Thanks, Mom and Dad, for the $85,000 head start. The math was simple. They weren't broke, they just weren't buying me. I didn't cry, I didn't scream, I just felt the temperature in the room drop to 0. Before we dive in, drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community. To understand the rage, you have to understand the kitchen. A Michelin star kitchen isn't a workplace. It is a high-velocity machine built of stainless steel, fire and ego. I was the executive sous chef. That meant I was the engine for 10 years. I had trained my body to ignore fatigue, ignore burns, and ignore the screaming need for sleep. The kitchen demands perfection, and it demands it at 400 degrees. It happened on a Tuesday right in the middle of the dinner rush. I was working the scallop station, the hottest spot on the line. A junior line cook bumped a handle, a pan of grapeseed oil shimmering near its smoke point tipped. It was simple physics. The oil hit the burner. A pillar of flame shot up. I didn't think, I reacted. I jerked back to avoid the fire. My boot found a slick of grease on the floor and I went down. I didn't feel the impact of the floor. All I felt was my left hand, my dominant hand, my money maker, plunging into the spilled searing oil as I tried to catch myself. Then came the snap, a sickening wet crack as my wrist shattered under my own weight. I didn't scream. You don't scream in my kitchen, you resolve the problem. But when I looked at my hand, the skin was already bubbling, and the fingers were bent at angles that defied biology. The pain wasn't a sensation. It was a blinding white light that erased the rest of the world. The emergency room was the opposite of my kitchen. It was cold, slow, and smelled of rubbing alcohol and fear. The surgeon didn't mince words: third-degree burns, a commuted fracture, severe nerve damage. He used words like reconstructive and grafts. He told me I needed surgery within 48 hours if I ever wanted to hold a knife again. He also told me the specialist who could do the nerve work didn't take my basic insurance. The price tag was $4,500 up front. I make a chef's salary in a major city. That means I make enough to look successful but not enough to survive a catastrophe. Between rent in the metro area, student loans from culinary school, and the cost of living, my savings were thin. I had $500. I needed 9 times that. I sat on the paper-covered exam table, shivering in a thin gown, and stared at the wall. I had always been the strong one, the one who figured it out, the one who didn't ask for help, but this was my life, this was my art. Without my hand I was nothing, so I broke my own rule. I called home. My mother answered on the 3rd ring. I swallowed my pride, fighting through the haze of painkillers. Mom, I said, my voice cracking. I got hurt bad, I need surgery or I lose my job. It's $4,500. I can pay you back, but I need it now. There was a pause, a long, heavy silence. Then came the sigh. Oh, Lauren, she said, her voice dripping with a rehearsed sort of pity. We would love to help, really, but we're destitute right now. Your father's investments took a hit. The upkeep on the lake house is bleeding us dry. We just don't have that kind of cash lying around. I closed my eyes. I felt a wave of guilt wash over me. How could I be so selfish, asking them for money when they were struggling? I apologized. I told her I would figure it out. I hung up the phone, feeling small, stupid, and utterly alone. I believed her. I sat there in the sterile light, cradling my ruined hand, and I believed her. I didn't know that at that exact moment she was signing a check for $85,000 for my brother's down payment. I didn't know I was being played. I just knew that the only person coming to save me was me. Recovery is a humiliation. It is a series of small indignities that strip away your autonomy layer by layer. For the first week, I slept on my friend K.H. Lowe's couch because I couldn't climb the stairs to my own apartment. I couldn't tie my shoes. I couldn't button my jeans. I couldn't even open a bottle of water. I was 29 years old, a woman who managed a kitchen staff of 40 and ordered $50,000 of inventory a week. And now I was helpless. Chloe was a saint. She ran a bakery, waking up at 3:00 in the morning to knead dough. Yet she still found the energy to cut my food into bite-sized pieces before she left. But in the quiet hours of the morning, when the painkillers wore off and the throbbing returned, I was alone with my phone. That screen became a window into a parallel universe. My brother Logan didn't just buy a loft, he launched a lifestyle. He was 26, a content creator whose primary talent was looking expensive in borrowed clothes. His feed was a barrage of curated success. New beginnings, the captions read, "Hustle pays off." I watched a video posted 3 days after my accident. The camera panned around a massive industrial space in the Arts District. Exposed brick, 20-foot ceilings, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the skyline. It was the kind of real estate that cost nearly $1 million, and there in the center of the frame were Thomas and Heather. My parents, they weren't destitute, they weren't struggling. My mother was wearing a new cashmere wrap, holding a glass of champagne. My father was beaming his arm around Logan's shoulders, pointing out where the podcast studio would go. They looked vibrant, they looked rich. They looked like people who had just dropped an $85,000 down payment without blinking. I paused the video on my mother's smiling face. I zoomed in. She looked so proud, not a trace of worry lines, no shadow of the financial ruin she had cried about on the phone to me. For years I had told myself I was the independent one. I wore my resilience like armor. I didn't ask for money, I didn't ask for help, I didn't bring them drama. I thought this was a virtue, I thought it earned me their respect. Lying on that couch, staring at the evidence of their betrayal, I finally understood the architecture of our family. I wasn't just the older sister, I was the glass child. It's a term for siblings of high-needs children, usually those with illness or disability. But in our house, Logan's need was his ego. He required constant validation, constant funding, constant attention to maintain his fragile sense of self. To balance the scales, I had to be invisible, I had to be transparent. I had signed an invisible contract before I could even read. The terms were simple: be low maintenance and we will love you. Ask for nothing and you will be safe. I had upheld my end of the bargain. I had paid my own tuition, I had worked double shifts, I had never ever been a burden. I thought I was buying insurance for a rainy day. I thought that by saving them the trouble of parenting me for 20 years, I was banking goodwill. I thought that if I ever truly fell, they would be there to catch me because I had never asked them to catch me before. I was wrong. The contract was a scam. They didn't love me for being low maintenance. They just loved that I didn't cost them anything. The goodwill I thought I was banking didn't exist. My silence hadn't purchased their loyalty, it had only purchased their indifference. I looked at Logan's loft again. That $85,000 wasn't just money. It was the sum total of every birthday gift I didn't get, every tuition check I didn't ask for, and every emergency I handled alone. It was my silence cashed out and handed to him. The rage that followed wasn't hot. It didn't burn like the fire that took my hand. It was cold. It was the temperature of deep water. I realized then that my hand wasn't the only thing that had been shattered. The invisible contract was void, and if they weren't going to play by the rules of family, neither was I. I didn't call them to scream. I didn't drive over to the lake house to throw a fit. I simply took a screenshot of Logan's Instagram post, the one where he's popping champagne in his new living room, and sent it to my mother. I added one sentence: "I thought you were destitute." Her reply came 3 minutes later. It wasn't an apology, it was a justification. "Don't be dramatic, Lauren. Logan needs a platform for his career. This is an investment in his future. You have a career, you're established, you're tough enough to handle a setback. He isn't." There it was. The truth typed out in blue bubbles. I was penalized for my strength because I could survive the fall. They felt justified in pushing me. They didn't see my injury as a crisis. They saw it as a test I was expected to ace on my own. I put the phone down on the flour-dusted counter of K.H. Lowe's bakery. It was 4 a.m. The air smelled of yeast and caramelized sugar, a sharp, warm contrast to the antiseptic sting of the hospital. Chloe was prepping the sourdough, her arms dusted white up to the elbows. When she saw my face, she didn't ask what happened. She just wiped her hands on her apron and walked over. "Time for the change?" she asked softly. I nodded, looking away. The bandage change was the worst part of the day. It was a visceral reminder of what I had lost. My hand, once my most precise tool, was a raw, angry map of trauma. Chloe sat me down on a stool. She gathered the sterile gauze, the saline, the ointment. Her movements were efficient but incredibly gentle. She wasn't a nurse. She was a baker. She understood delicate things. She peeled back the old dressings with the same care she used to laminate dough. Careful not to tear, careful not to hurt. When the air hit the raw nerve endings, I hissed, tears springing to my eyes involuntarily. Chloe didn't flinch. She didn't look away in disgust. She blew softly on the skin to cool it. "I've got you," she whispered. "Just breathe, I'm right here." She cleaned the wound, she applied the salve. She wrapped it back up, securing the tape with a firmness that made me feel held. Then she led me to the industrial sink in the back. "Lean back," she said. She washed my hair. I couldn't get the bandages wet, so I hadn't been able to shower properly in days. Chloe adjusted the water temperature until it was perfect. She massaged the shampoo into my scalp, her fingers strong and rhythmic. It was such a simple, intimate act. It was the kind of thing a mother does for a child who is sick, but my mother wasn't here. My mother was 40 miles away, sleeping in a lake house she claimed she couldn't afford to maintain, dreaming of my brother's success. My mother had chosen a building over her daughter's body. As the warm water ran over my scalp, washing away the sweat and the fear of the last few days, something shifted in my chest. I looked up at Chloe, tired, covered in flour, focused entirely on making me comfortable. This was the lighthouse. In the middle of the absolute worst storm of my life, while my biological family was looting the ship, Chloe was standing on the shore, keeping the light on. She wasn't related to me. She owed me nothing. Yet, here she was doing the dirty, painful work of caretaking because she loved me. Realized then that family is a verb. It's not a static fact of biology. It's an active choice you make every day. My parents had chosen Logan. They had chosen status. They had chosen the lie. Chloe had chosen me. I closed my eyes, letting the water run clear. The grief was still there, but the confusion was gone. I knew exactly who my family was now, and I knew exactly who they weren't. When I opened my eyes, the tears had stopped. I wasn't just clean, I was clear. And a clear mind is a dangerous thing for a liar to face. I wiped my face with the towel Khlo handed me. The water had washed away the grime, but it hadn't washed away the math. The numbers still didn't add up. My parents were financially irresponsible. They bought boats they couldn't dock and clothes they couldn't afford, but $85,000 in liquid cash, that was impossible. They had always lived on the edge of their means, leveraging debt to maintain the appearance of wealth. The lake house was mortgaged to the hilt. Their retirement accounts were drained years ago to fund Logan's first failed startup. So where did the money come from? Then I remembered the box. When my grandmother passed away 5 years ago, she didn't leave a big inheritance. She was a Depression-era woman who didn't trust banks or stocks, but she did trust the government. She had bought series savings bonds for decades. When she died, she left a specific instruction for the grandchildren's future. My father, as the executive, had placed them in a safety deposit box at the downtown branch of First National, because I had handled the paperwork for her estate, because I was the responsible one, the one who handled everything. My name was still on the access list. I didn't want to believe it. It was too dark even for them, but the suspicion took root in my gut like a weed. I borrowed Khlo's car. I couldn't drive well with one hand, but I managed. The drive to the bank felt like a funeral procession. The bank manager recognized me. "Lauren, we haven't seen you in ages," she said, her smile bright and oblivious. "Here to access the box. Just checking the contents," I lied. My voice was steady, but my heart was hammering against my ribs. She led me into the vault. The air was cool and smelled of dust and old paper. She unlocked the box, slid it out, and placed it on the table in the private viewing room. "Take your time." She closed the door. I was alone. I stared at the long metal box. I knew what should be inside: a thick stack of paper bonds wrapped in rubber bands. Smelling of vanilla and age, I reached out with my good hand and lifted the lid. Empty, not just light empty, a hollow metal echo. I sat down hard on the chair, my breath hitched. It was one thing to suspect. It was another to see the void where my legacy should have been. $85,000. The math was perfect. I stood up and opened the door. "I need the access logs," I told the manager. She saw my face and stopped smiling. She tapped on her keyboard. "Here it is. Last access was 2 weeks ago. Thomas, your father, 2 weeks ago." The exact week Logan put the offer on the Loft. I thanked her, took the print out, and walked out into the blinding sunlight. I sat in the car and pulled a folded piece of paper from my wallet. It was old, the creases worn soft like fabric. A letter from my grandmother written in her shaky cursive script. "My dearest Lauren, these bonds are for you and Logan. But I know you, my little chef. I know you dream of your own kitchen. Use this to build your restaurant. Feed people, that is the best way to love them." She had earmarked it. It wasn't a legal will. The bonds were technically payable on death to my father as the beneficiary, but the moral instruction was absolute. She wanted me to have a restaurant. She wanted me to have a future. My parents hadn't just spent their own savings. They hadn't just made a bad financial decision. They had walked into a vault, taken the literal embodiment of my grandmother's love and hope for me, and handed it to Logan to buy a bachelor pad. They stole my restaurant. They stole my dream. The sadness I had felt in the shower evaporated. It was replaced by a cold, hard clarity. This wasn't a family dispute anymore. This wasn't about favoritism or neglect. This was theft. They had stolen my past to pay for Logan's present. I looked at the access log in my hand. Thomas's signature was scrolled in blue ink. It looked rushed, guilty. I didn't drive home. I drove to the nearest office supply store. I bought a fresh notebook and a set of pens. I went back to Chloe, sat at her kitchen table, and opened the notebook. I wrote down the date. I wrote down the amount. I wrote down the access log details. This wasn't a diary, it was an evidence file. I wasn't the sad injured daughter anymore, I was the executive sous chef. And in my kitchen, when someone steals from the inventory, you don't cry about it, you document it, and then you fire them. My parents thought they had gotten away with it because I was the nice one, the quiet one. They forgot one thing: the quiet ones are the ones who pay attention, and now I had the receipts. 6 months is a lifetime in the restaurant industry. It's enough time to open a place, fail, and be forgotten. For me, it was enough time to heal, pivot, and launch. My hand wasn't perfect. The scars were thick pink ridges across my palm, and my grip strength was only at 80%, but I had adapted. I learned to use different knives. I learned to rely on my team more. And I learned that I didn't need my parents to survive. With Chloe as my partner, we launched the Burnt Crust, a pop-up kitchen concept operating out of her bakery on weekends. It started small, just sourdough pizzas and rustic fire-roasted vegetables, but the word spread fast. People lined up around the block. We were making money, real money, not Logan money built on debt and parents, but earned money. I had gone no contact with my family the day I found the empty deposit box. I didn't announce it. I didn't send a dramatic letter. I just blocked their numbers, changed my email, and disappeared from their lives. While I was building, their house of cards was collapsing. It started with the economy. The market dipped and my father's safe investments evaporated. Then came the real blow: Logan. The influencer lifestyle is expensive, and without Daddy's credit card to refuel it, the tank ran dry fast. He couldn't make the mortgage payments on the loft. The HOA fees piled up. He defaulted in 3 months. Because my parents had co-signed. Because they had leveraged their own assets to buy him that status symbol. The bank didn't just come for the loft, they came for everything. I heard about it through the grapevine. An old neighbor mentioned seeing a foreclosure sign on the lake house lawn. The lake house, their pride and joy, the symbol of their success. It was going under. I didn't feel happy. I didn't feel sad. I just felt numb. Like watching a building implode from a safe distance. You acknowledge the destruction, but you don't feel the heat. Then they showed up. It was a Saturday night. The pop-up was slamming. The air was thick with the smell of wood smoke and roasted garlic. I was on the line expediting orders, feeling the rhythm of the kitchen hum in my bones. "Chef," one of my runners said, looking uneasy. "There are some people at the back door asking for you. They say they're your parents." I froze. My hand throbbed phantom pain. I wiped my hands on my apron, took a deep breath, and walked to the back alley. They looked diminished. That's the only word for it. My father, usually so puffed up with self-importance, looked shrunken in his polo shirt. My mother's hair was unkempt, her eyes darting around nervously. They looked like strangers who had aged 10 years and 6 months. "Lauren," my mother breathed, stepping forward as if to hug me. I took a sharp step back. She froze. "What do you want?" I asked. My voice was calm. Professional, the voice of a chef running a kitchen, not a daughter seeking approval. We heard you were doing well," my father said, his voice raspy. "The place looks busy." "It is. I have to get back to the line. What do you want?" My mother burst into tears. It was a performance I had seen 1,000 times, but it lacked its usual power. "We're losing the lake house, Lauren, the bank, Logan, it's all gone wrong. We need $15,000 to stop the auction. Just 15,000. We know you're making money now, please, it's our home." I stared at them. 15,000. That was less than a fifth of what they had stolen from me to give to Logan. "Where's Logan?" I asked. My father looked at his shoes. He's staying with friends in the city. He couldn't be here. Of course he couldn't. He had taken the money, burned it, and ran when the ashes started to fall. He was the golden child after all. He didn't do cleanup. "So let me get this straight," I said, leaning against the brick wall, crossing my arms over my chest. "You stole my grandmother's bonds money she specifically left for my restaurant to buy Logan a loft. He lost the loft, you lost your savings, and now you want me to use the money I earned with my own broken hand to save your vacation house." My mother's face went white. "You know about the bonds." "I know everything," I said. "I saw the empty box. I saw the access logs. I know you took it. We were going to pay it back," my father shouted, but there was no force behind it. "No," I said, "you're thieves." I looked at them, really looked at them. I expected to feel anger. I expected to want to scream, but I didn't. I just felt done. The ledger was balanced, not with money, but with truth. "I'm not giving you $15,000, I said. "I'm not giving you 15 cents. You made your investment. You bet everything on Logan. Now you have to collect your returns from him." "Lauren, please," my mother begged, reaching out again. "We have nowhere else to go. We're your parents." "I know," I said. I turned around. I put my hand on the heavy steel door of the bakery. "Good luck," I said, and I closed the door. I locked it. I heard them pounding on the other side for a minute, shouting my name, but the noise of the kitchen, the clatter of pans, the shout of orders, the sizzle of food drowned them out. I walked back to the line. Chloe looked at me, a question in her eyes. Everything okay? She asked. I looked at my hand. The scars were there, shiny and tough. They would always be there, but the hand worked. It could hold a knife, it could knead dough, it could build a life. Yeah, I said, picking up my knife. Order in. I didn't save their house. I didn't say them. If you believe family is about how they treat you, not just blood, hit that like button and subscribe. Share this story with someone who needs to know they're worth more than the scraps they've been given.